Welcome to the SEI Podcast Series, a production of the Carnegie Mellon University Software Engineering Institute. The SEI is a federally funded research and development center sponsored by the U.S. Department of Defense. A transcript of today's podcast is posted on the SEI website at sei.cmu.edu/podcasts.
Good afternoon. My name is Bobbie Stempfley, and I'm the director of the CERT division at the Software Engineering Institute. My guest today is Dr. Lorrie Cranor. She's the director of CMU's CyLab Security and Privacy Institute. She also directs the CyLab Usable Privacy and Security Lab and co-directs the MSIT Privacy Engineering Master's Program. In 2016, she served as the Chief Technology Officer of the Federal Trade Commission in Washington, D.C., and she's the co-founder of Wombat Security Technologies Incorporated, a security awareness training company. You're busy. Thank you for being here today, Dr. Cranor.
Thank you. You can call me Lorrie.
This podcast is really focused on exploring the future of cyber and privacy and trying to take lessons from the past, seeing what can be applied and where we have to take breaks from the past. And so I'm really excited about having you here today because this triangle of cybersecurity, privacy, and usability seems elusive, and it seems to be the pivot point for your career. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you've been working on?
Sure. So I've been working with lots of students and faculty at Carnegie Mellon to try to solve some of the human problems related to security and privacy. So on the security side, we've done a lot of work with authentication and passwords and basically trying to make the best of the bad situation we're in with passwords so that we can have passwords that are both secure and more usable than they typically are. And on the privacy side, we've been looking at privacy policies and privacy choice options and how to make them more usable.
So usability being this really key element in the center. We hear a lot about the humans either being the weakest link or the greatest innovation in situations. Do you see security and privacy coming together, being separate? Are there use cases where they're one or the other?
So I think security, privacy, and usability are often in tension with each other. All three of those things I think can be in tension, but they don't necessarily have to be. And so it's great when we can find ways for them to work together, where the most secure thing we can make it also the easiest thing, so that users don't have to decide: do I want convenience or do I want security?
Are there good examples of that you've really been able to push over the last decade or so?
Well, I think if you look at encryption, anytime we have an encryption tool that users have to do something to use, they pretty much don't use it unless they are required to in their job. But we have something like HTTPS in a web browser where the user doesn't have to do anything. It just works. And that's great. That's convenient. Now, there's a limit to that because it just works under normal circumstances. But if there is an expired certificate at a website, then the user is going to get a prompt. They're supposed to do something. And it breaks down because for most users, they can't really distinguish between the website forgot to renew their certificate and there's actually a man-in-the-middle attack. And so it's not perfect, but that's the direction that we're going in.
Yeah, so not just design it more securely, but make secure use by default the more frequent choice. Are there examples of more private by default?
Well, I think if we look at the physical world, we can see good examples of privacy by default. So, for example, there are bathroom doors that when you go in and lock the door, it also turns a thing to tell people that it's occupied. And you don't have to give any special signal. You don't have to hang the occupied sign. It's built into the lock. And so I think those sorts of mechanisms are really wonderful.
Yeah, that's I hadn't thought about it in sort of that context. So how do you make people more aware of the fact that something is private or not as it's executing as well?
Yeah.
So they can make decisions as a part of it. Wow, I like that. So when you think about I think today about this idea of data and data being so pervasive, right? We're leaving, what do they call it, digital dust with us everywhere we go, and it's being monetized in some way or another. Do you think about, how do you see that affecting the economics of security and privacy?
Yeah, so people often say that all these free services that we get, basically we are the product. The reason it's free is because we are being monetized, and so there are a lot of business models that are built on collecting our digital dust and monetizing that, and that's a case where when people find out about it, they often don't like that. They don't want to be tracked in that way. And we do have a tension between wanting these great convenient services and not really wanting to be tracked to that extent.
I always worry about the clickbait, right? Participate in this competition or in this thing. It feels like it's just an opportunity for us to feed some monolithic infrastructure that can then use that information in some way.
Yes, definitely.
It's interesting. So I've been thinking a lot lately about aesthetics and how aesthetics is key to usability. It's actually a place where you and I have a little bit in common, in addition to our professional life, in that I sew and quilt, and as I know you do as well. And so it's been fun to think about how these things come together. And I know you've brought them together in your career. How do you think about aesthetics and how it feeds your work in privacy and security?
Yeah, so I definitely think about aesthetics a lot in my work. I had an opportunity several years ago to actually take a sabbatical, and I spent my sabbatical at the art school here at Carnegie Mellon. And I had to tell the dean what I was going to do on my sabbatical, and I said, well, I'm going to visualize security and privacy through art. I wrote like all of one paragraph, and it was approved. So I went over to the art school with my sewing machine and lots of fabric and just started sewing things. And then partway through, I said, oh, right, I was supposed to do something related to security and privacy. And so I started thinking about how I could incorporate security and privacy into my artwork. And one of the obvious things, since I was making quilts, was that I needed to make a security blanket. And
I like the entendre there.
Yeah. And then the question is, what does a security blanket look like? And what I ended up doing, because I was doing work on passwords, was I did a visualization of bad passwords. And it's a big word cloud. It's done in colors like a baby blanket. So it is like that security blanket, but it actually offers no security. So that was one of the projects that I did. I also did some related to de-identification and privacy that were kind of interesting. And I also made a password dress to go with the password quilt. So it was a lot of fun. And so that was where I explicitly was working on security and privacy with art. One of the things that came out of that was actually collaborating with some of the faculty in the art school. And we did a project for women in art and cybersecurity, which I got to participate in. And so we had about a dozen female artists and technologists working together for a week. And we each had a project that got put together into a book. And so my project was called Privacy Illustrated. And I went around and collected drawings of privacy. And so I started with kindergartners. And I went into a kindergarten classroom, and I asked the kindergartners to draw pictures of privacy, which was fascinating.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What did they draw?
A lot of potties.
Okay, I can see that.
But also clubhouses, trying to hide from their siblings. Yeah, I mean, when you're in kindergarten, a big privacy threat is actually your brother or sister. And so then I went into elementary schools, and I saw similar types of things, and then high school, and then adults. And the older they got, the more we started seeing technology coming in, concepts of things that were in the news. So the NSA, started becoming part of it. I actually saw potties in every age group. Very common theme. But yeah, that was really fascinating.
And how did that then inform what you're taking on in your research?
Yeah, so we collected at this point over 400 of these drawings, and we have a website that they're on. And a couple of years ago, my PhD students said, can we systematically go through these drawings and learn something? And so they went through and basically coded each drawing as to what was depicted in the drawing, but they also looked at some of the privacy frameworks in the literature, and they looked to see which of the elements in these privacy frameworks were represented in the drawings and which ones did we not see in the drawings. And so it was a really interesting exercise in seeing kind of how people think about privacy, with the caveat that there may be some things they think about that they don't draw because they can't figure out how to draw. So we don't know if they're not thinking about them or they just couldn't draw it. But it was still very interesting, and we actually wrote a paper that was presented at the Privacy Enhancing Technology Symposium.
So I would imagine that showed things that where the frameworks were actually addressing a different privacy concern than what these individuals might have thought about.
Yeah, we saw that there were things that experts talk a lot about, like, for example, how we control privacy settings. And we saw some of that in the drawings, but that wasn't as kind of in the forefront as it is in expert conversations.
Yeah. It makes me think about we've talked a lot in the security community about whether security and innovation is a false choice, right? Security is oftentimes seen as being the antithema of innovation. So are security, usability, and privacy, even though they're in tension with each other, is it really a false choice? Can we not find a balance between the three?
I think in some cases we can find a balance. Sometimes we have to be more creative to figure out how to do that. Right now there's been, we've recently had privacy regulation in a number of jurisdictions, and there's talk of additional privacy regulation. And, we hear from companies sometimes that these types of regulations will hurt their business. And in the short term, they're probably right. But in the long term, I think we should really think about it as an opportunity to come up with new business models that will actually benefit people and not just feed off of invading their privacy.
Are you seeing it strikes me that there's so much focus in the regulations has been on trying to create transparency about what the privacy rules are that a particular service is operating under. Are you seeing that making a difference?
I think it makes a little bit of a difference, but not as much as we'd like. So I've actually been working in this area for over 20 years. I was involved in a W3C privacy standard, which we started work on it in the late 1990s. And the idea was to take website privacy policies and put them in XML.
Right.
And then your web browser can read them automatically, so you don't have to. And the thought at the time was this would be really convenient for consumers, and it would encourage websites to have better privacy policies once people were actually looking at them or their browser was looking at them. It was a great idea. It never really got adopted. It's it's a standard, but it's now been demoted or whatever as a standard. No one's using it, and it's disappointing that that wasn't more successful. And ever since then, people keep suggesting that again. People will say to me, I have this great idea if we just took privacy policies and made them computer readable. And like, yeah, we tried that.
Yeah.
But I think it was a good idea. It's still a good idea. And I think there's increasing appetite to actually being able to do that. Only what we need now is kind of what we had, the idea we had before, but now on steroids, in that it's not just websites that are collecting our data, it's all of these devices in our environment. And nobody has the time or patience or interest to go and interrogate every smart light bulb they walk by to find out what data they're collecting. And so we really do need those computer-readable policies, and then we need user agents that can consume that data and configure our settings for us based on one set of preferences we provided early on.
Yeah. And perhaps this is the tie back to aesthetics again, right? You need the computer readable and presentable in a way that is clear and understandable to the person walking by, right? So
exactly. So most of the time the person walking by is not going to want to see it. But if today I say, well, actually, I do want to know what's going on in here, I should be able to look at my device and have some understandable representation of what's going on. Yeah. And so that's the kind of work that actually my students are working on right now, is trying to design what does that information look like. We're also working on designing, we're calling a privacy and security nutrition label for IoT devices. Mm-hmm. And so we're looking at, on the package of those smart devices, can we put some really understandable information about security and privacy?
It's some of the work we're doing is on bills of material, so very related in the context of it isn't clear what the components of those devices are, and without knowing what those components are, you don't always understand the kinds of risks you're accepting by bringing even that macro device into your environment.
Yes.
So I can see linkages between these two.
Yeah, they are, and in fact, we've designed our label to be 2 layers. And so the first layer would be on the box or on the website, and then there would be a link or a QR code to the detailed layer. Mm-hmm. And in the detailed layer, if there is a bill of materials, there would be a link to where you would get that, as well as a bunch of other things that are technical details that most consumers aren't interested in, but the experts and in an enterprise, the people who may be making those purchase decisions would want to see. And so we want to link all of that together.
Well, and as you define the label, it strikes me that back to the making it available by default becomes important. So how do we bring this into the development processes so the production of the content of that label happens by default, since there's so much instrumentation now in all of the development and production processes.
Yes.
I can see I can see a future different than the past. With this activity. So this is I'd like to explore something a little bit different. I heard once someone say that we always grossly overestimate what can be done in 5 years and underestimate what can be done in 10. So what problem did you expect we'd have solved by now that we're still tackling?
Yeah, well, with the whole experience with P3P, computer-readable privacy policies, I thought that it was easy. There's nothing too technically sophisticated about that. And had you asked me 20 years ago, whether we'd still be trying to figure out how to get these things adopted in 20 years, I would say no, that's the easy part. But it turned out actually the technology was the easy part. Getting it adopted was not easy at all.
Back to the humans.
Yeah.
So what have we solved that you didn't think we could? What's the converse of that one?
So I think we've made a lot more progress on automating things than I thought we would. I think self-driving cars actually really surprised me. We're not 100% there yet with them, but I would not have predicted we would be as far along as we are.
I have to say, I thought you were going to say that you would have thought we'd have been past passwords by now. So I love the fact you went someplace different, right? I keep thinking, with as much drama as we've been through with passwords, I would have hoped we'd have found a different authentication mechanism by now. But
yeah, well,
it's been adopted.
Too many people have predicted the death of passwords, including Bill Gates, and they've been wrong. So I am not going to go there.
Not touching that one. That makes sense. So we touched on autonomous vehicles a little bit. I know here at Carnegie Mellon we're doing a lot with robotics and artificial intelligence. How do you think about what are the most pressing of the privacy and security challenges in that space?
Yeah, so I think there's just tons of them. And I think there's both challenges and opportunities with automation and AI and security and privacy. So I think that there's a lot of vulnerabilities that can be exploited using machine learning approaches, but we can also use them to defend things as well. And I think, on the security side, a lot of it is about vulnerability exploitation and defenses. But on the privacy side, I think there becomes issues of fairness and equity and things like that, because as we automate decision making, we end up inadvertently baking biases into the system that we don't even realize that we are doing.
So a lot we have to watch out for, right? Because I think to some extent the design patterns we've used in the past break a bit in this space. And so we really have to think about new design patterns here in order to treat data as the first-class citizen it is in the space that's here, and to recognize all of the data that we have is the manifestation of all the decisions we've made in the past, with all of the biases that we've brought to those decisions. Yeah. So I can see that a rich future there. So you're not going to predict the death of passwords. Any thoughts on what sort of the next most pressing problem might be?
I don't have a good prediction on what's pressing. I mean, I think in general it's really defending our systems from attacks of all kinds. And I think as we have more technology in the hands of more people, it's offering great services and great convenience, but all of these are new attack vectors, and so I think there's a big rush to get new products to the market, and I don't think security is the first thing that they're thinking about, and a lot of the startups are really not thinking about it at all, and so now we have lots of devices. In homes and people that say, how is anybody going to, cause any problems with the light bulb in my house? But actually they can.
I think about the Mariah bot as a proof point of being able to cause problems with things that you hadn't predicted, right? Baby monitors.
There.
So it's really interesting to me, because I describe the security problem as one where we're always facing the adversary action of the future, but we haven't stopped facing the adversary action of the past.
Yes.
Right? And so we sort of live in this past, present, and future simultaneously in this connected world, and have to find a way to manage our way through all of it.
Yes.
Yeah. So last question, what's your favorite part of your job right now?
My favorite part of my job? I think it's working with students. I love the energy and creativity that students bring, and the fact that they come up with ideas that I would never have come up with and never thought to do. And they're not always good ideas, but they come up with enough of them that some of them stick. I really enjoy working with the students.
That's a wonderful, real impact on seeing a future that's going to be different than the past because of their creativity.
Yeah.
So I like it. Thank you so much for coming and talking to me today. I really appreciate it, and the collaboration between our two institutes is really wonderful. So thank you.
You're welcome.
If you'd like to learn more about CyLab's research, please go see their website. The URL is presented at the bottom of this screen. If you'd like to see more about what we're doing at the Software Engineering Institute, please visit our website and see the work that we're doing for the Defense Department and the Internet. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. This episode is available where you download podcasts, including SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. It is also available on the SEI website at sei.cmu.edu/podcasts and the SEI's YouTube channel. This copyrighted work is made available through the Software Engineering Institute, a federally funded research and development center sponsored by the U.S. Department of Defense. For more information about the SEI and this work, please visit www.sei.cmu.edu. As always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email us at info@sei.cmu.edu. Thank you.